Inner Mongolia is one of the 5 autonomous regions in the People's Republic of China. But did you know that Inner Mongolia has twice been an independent country? Well, sort of. During China's last imperial dynasty, there were 2 Mongolian provinces, Inner Mongolia and Outer Mongolia. In 1911, the last emperor was overthrown, the Republic of China was declared, and lots of political confusion and chaos ensued. Seizing the opportunity, Outer Mongolia declared independence. The newly formed Soviet Union interfered extensively in its politics, though, and it eventually became a Soviet puppet state. Inner Mongolia remained part of China. But in the 1930s, Japan began seizing bits of Chinese territory to set up its own puppet states. The most famous of these was Manchukuo, Japan's totalitarian version of Manchuria. But Japan also seized Inner Mongolia, creating the lesser-known Mengjiang. Mengjiang was nominally independent for a short time. It had its own prince as head of state, its own flag, and even its own money. But in reality, it was always something more like a Japanese colony. Even this fake independence didn't last, though, as after a few years, Mengjiang was folded into a larger puppet state known as the Wang Jingwei regime. In the closing stages of World War II, the whole farce collapsed, and Soviet and Mongolian armies, as in Outer Mongolia, invaded Inner Mongolia. After running the Japanese out, the Soviets set up their own puppet state to replace it. Wow, this is a lot of puppet states. This one was called the Inner Mongolian People's Republic. It lasted less than 2 months. A civil war broke out in China between the nationalists and the communists, and communist forces, led by a Mongolian known as Ulanhu, invaded and forced the Soviets out. Ulanhu and his army retained control of Inner Mongolia for the rest of the Civil War, and when the People's Republic of China was declared in 1949, it became one of China's autonomous regions. Ulanhu stayed on as leader, and over time became the highest-ranking ethnic minority official in the People's Republic of China. His family remains prominent. His granddaughter, Bu Xiaolin, runs the region today. Inner Mongolia has been a foreign-controlled puppet state twice, once controlled by the Japanese and once controlled by the Soviets, but has no history as a widely recognized independent country. So, obvious question, is there an active Inner Mongolian independence movement today? Yes, but it's complicated. There are several groups, mostly based overseas, calling for greater autonomy or perhaps outright independence for Inner Mongolia, but they're all relatively small. If you ask the Chinese government, though, they'll tell you that Inner Mongolian separatism is a large, well-organized and active movement which, of course, they need to brutally suppress. For example, Hada, Inner Mongolia's most prominent dissident, published underground newspapers in the 1990s. These called for the Chinese government to end the mass killings of Mongolians, stop eradicating Mongolian culture and language, and protect traditional grazing lands. These would be completely reasonable demands to make in a free society, but China is not free. In 1995, Hada was arrested for promoting separatism and kept in custody for nearly 20 years. More recently, protests erupted after the government decided to stop teaching schoolchildren in Mongolian and switch to teaching in Mandarin, the main language of China. The protests were clearly just local people wanting to preserve their culture and identity, but in official media, they were described as Inner Mongolian separatists, based on no real evidence, and suppressed. So the Chinese government seems to need separatists, whether they really exist or not, to justify its continued oppression of Inner Mongolia. As for the genuine groups calling for greater autonomy or outright independence, these mostly operate from abroad and include the Inner Mongolian People's Party, which created the flag used by the wider movement. The most active group is the Southern Mongolia Human Rights Information Center, Southern Mongolia being an alternative name for Inner Mongolia. What about the Other Mongolia? It's no longer a puppet state. So is it helping Inner Mongolia break free from China? No, just the opposite, in fact. Recently, a Mongolian journalist was arrested in Ulaanbaatar, supposedly for supporting Inner Mongolian separatists. His case was initially dismissed, but with no new evidence, he was later sentenced to 10 years in prison. Why Mongolia does this isn't totally clear, but it's possibly responding to pressure from its powerful neighbor. Will Inner Mongolia ever become a truly independent country? It doesn't seem likely to happen soon. Inner Mongolia lacks the vibrant and well-organized national movements that Tibet and East Turkestan enjoy. But China's central government has started showing serious cracks of late, so who knows? Maybe someday.